welcome, and of course, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And we'll move into our text. So the verse we started yesterday talking about God's gracious acts to the Jewish people during the desert, in that desert wandering from Egypt to the land of Israel, land of Canaan at the time. And we continue a little bit. And what we're doing essentially, of course, is setting up the argument of this poem, which is the lack of appreciation on the part of the Jewish people for all these blessings that God has done for them. And just need to ask anyone who's unmuted to please check and make sure you are muted. May have to double check. Let's see here. Okay, thank you. So here's the verse. Beautiful, memorable verse, by the way. Keneshe Yair Kino, as a Nesher is an eagle, as an eagle stirs up his pinions, his wings. Okay, on the next word, next page. Al Gozalo Yerachef, on his fledglings, right? He hovers. Remember the word merachefet in Genesis, the early first chapter of Genesis, how we talked about Ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim, right? The Spirit of God hovered over the surface of the waters. So on his fledglings, he hovers. Yifrus knafav, he spreads his wings. Yikachehu, he takes them. Yisaehu, he carries them al evrato, on his pinions. That is, as I said, a memorable metaphor of how God basically cared for the Jewish people on their journey from Egypt. So let's take a look at Rashi on this. Kenesha Yair Kino. So he's explaining this. Nahagam berachamim. What it's saying is, in what sense of mercy, compassion, he led the Jewish people. Uvechemla kenesha hazeh, and with the compassion of this eagle, Rachmani al-banav, who is so merciful to its children. Ve'eno nichnas lekino pitom, and it doesn't enter its nest suddenly, just doesn't suddenly enter its nest. Ad shehu mekashkesh, before it has a chance to flap and beat umetaref al banav b'chnafav, to make these sounds of the beating of his wings over his children, b'chnafav, with his wings. So before it enters the nest, it makes these sounds and lets those fledglings know it is arriving, so as not to scare them. And I imagine that this has something to do with the fact that despite God's incredible power and the amount of fear that it can engender, that God can engender in us when we are witnesses to God's power, that even though God was so close to the Jewish people in terms of the sense of God's presence there in the desert, it happened in a way that was not planned to scare them. So Rashi's going on here, describing the actions of the eagle here. Bein ilan le'ilan, between one tree and another tree. Bein shucha lechevrata, between one branch and its neighbor. Kadeshia iru banav, in order for it to wake up, to awaken his children. Vayehe bahem koach lekablot, is the point, right? And they should have strength to receive him. So we'd have to see what we could do to understand how that might appear in the desert, how God's closeness and appearance and presence in the tabernacle in a way that wouldn't scare everyone. Ya'ir Kino, he stirs up his nest. Okay, he wakes up, or his. So in this case, Ya'iru Ye'arer Banav, he wakes up his children. So Ya'ir Kino. So Cain here means his nest, and I think I translated it differently initially, but I think, if I was mistaken there, I'm correcting it here. Al gozalav yirachef, over he merachefet, right? He hovers over his fledglings. Eino machbid atzmo aleihem. He doesn't make his weight come down on them. In other words, he doesn't press down on them or make himself heavy on them. Ella mechofef, but he hovers. Nogea ve'eino nogea. He touches and he doesn't touch. Af HaKadosh Baruch Hu, here we go. So the Holy One, blessed be He. And this is a quote from Job, and it happens to be Elihu, not one of the three, quote, friends, but a fourth young man who has these speeches towards the end of the book, okay? And he says, Shaddai lo metza'anuhu sagi koach, right? And he says that literally it means Shaddai, right? The Almighty. Lo mitza'anuhu, we did not find him. Sagi koach. Sagi is actually an Aramaic word, and it means great, right? Koach, great in power. So what does this mean? It means Kesheba liten Torah, when God appeared when he came to give them the Torah, Lo nigla alehem meruach achat. He didn't appear to them from only one direction. So just, this amazing, didn't come like that. Ela me arba ruchot, that came from 4 different directions. Shene'emar, as is stated later on in the next chapter in Zvazot HaBracha, Hashem mi Sinai ba, God appeared from Sinai. Bezarach, he shone mi Seir Lamo, from Seir. That's would be the area where Esau lived, right? Hofia mehar Paran, he appeared from the Mount of Paran. Ata me Rivavot Kodesh, and he came from Rivavot, the places I'm going to translate it as Kodesh. And this is, and then so there's 3 directions, and in Chavakuk, in the prophet Chavakuk, chapter 3, Eloha mi Teman Yavo, right? God came from Teman. Teman is in the south. Zor Ruach Revi'it. This would be a 4th direction. So again, the idea of this incredible, undescribable power appearing for people to be able to perceive and yet not be frightened. And of course, there is a story, however, that after they heard the Israelites heard the first 2 words of the 10 Commandments coming directly from the divine source. Well, we know from the text itself, they say to Moses, you speak with God, and whatever you tell us we'll do, because they were so frightened. And there are midrashim that say that their souls departed from them and had to be returned to them. And my thought about that is, how much we don't really take seriously this particular material to the point where it's just ignored, and yet trying to reach out and say, wait a second, this has far more serious implications. And if we understood those implications, we would pay a great deal of attention to it. So, Yifros Knafav, spreads his wings, Yikachehu, he takes them. Kesheba litlan mimakom lamakom. When the eagle comes to take them from, or to carry them from one place to another place, Eino notlan beraglav. He doesn't take them with his claws, with his feet, his legs. Kisha'ar ufot, like other birds. Why? Rashi explains, the fi shisha'ar ufot, because the other birds, Yireim min hanesher, they are afraid of the eagle. Shehu magbia la'of, because he, or la'uf, because he flies so high, right? The eagle flies so high, uforeach alehem, and so he flies over them. So in other words, they're concerned that he's going to attack their young, and so they put themselves in between the eagle and their young. Lefichach, and for this reason, nosin beraglav, they carry nosan, beraglav, they carry them with their legs, with their feet, mipnei hanesher, on account of the eagle. Aval hanesher, but with regards to the eagle, eno yare elamin hachetz. The only thing the eagle's afraid of is the arrow, is an arrow. Lefichach, and that of course is coming from human beings below. Lefichach, and for this reason, masa'an al knafav, he carries his young on his wings. Omer, and he thinks, the eagle is considering, mutav shiyikanes hachetz bi, it's better for the arrow to enter me, velo yikanes bevanai, and not bevivni, and it shouldn't enter my child or my children. So how does this apply? Af HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In a similar way, the Holy One, blessed be He, and we read in Exodus 19, Va'asa etchem al kanfei nisharim. It actually says in Exodus chapter 19, I carried you on the wings of eagles. Keshenasu mitzrayim acharehem, when the Egyptians pursued them, vehisigum, and reached them. And the texts that have this word in it, chonim, encamped al hayam, by the Red Sea. You're at this point familiar with this particular story. Hayu zorkim bahem chitzin, they would cast at the Israelites, right? Chetz, arrow, ve'avnei balistraot, and stones from catapults. Miyad, and immediately it says in Exodus chapter 14, Vayisa malach Elohim, and the angel of the Lord journeyed the Gomer, etc. So remember, they were being led by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, right? And those are considered angelic beings. It says Vayavo bein machane Mitzrayim, and it says in the text itself that it came between the encampment of Egypt, etc. So again, specific acts of God in terms of the Jewish people. Again, and coming here, we're continuing this particular theme at this particular point. Adonai badad yanchenu. The Lord guided them alone. In other words, God alone guided them. Ve'ein imo el nechar, and there was no foreign god with God. There was no other divinity involved in this. And of course, I think the point about that's getting set up here is the following, right? That the belief and the trust in things other than God, and making the point here that there was no reason at all for them to show such a lack of appreciation, as we're going to see. Let's check the Rashi on this. Hashem badad, right? The Lord alone, in solitary. Hashem badad levateach, I'm going to say, nahagam bamidbar. Okay, in other words, God was alone to assure their practices or their journey, how to lead them in the desert. So we're saying, okay, so that's how God made sure there was nothing else that was leading them at the time. Ve'ein imo el nechar, and there was no other god, no foreign god with him. Lo haya koach be'echad mikol Elohei ha'odei kochavim. There wasn't the power in any single one of all the gods of the idolaters, laharot kocho, to display his power, ulahilachem imahem, and to battle against them. So we can understand this in a sense that this was a divine protection. Right now, of course, the question is there in fact some statement that these other gods exist? Of course, we don't believe that there are any other gods besides Hashem. But at the same time, of course, we acknowledge that people do believe in these other powers. And frankly, in a contemporary sense, the way in which people practice idolatry these days, in putting trust and power and confidence in anything else, in physical things. And we know that money is such an example, that people do worship money. V'rabotenu darshuhu, okay, and our sages, our rabbis, expounded this al ha'atid, regarding the future. V'chein tirgem unkulus, and if you check out the Aramaic translation, we can look and see what he says there. V'ani omer, so I think Rashi is saying here that this is in Rashi's humble opinion. He says, but I say, divrei tochacha hem, that in fact they are words of correction, right? Laha'id hashamayim va'aretz, in order to, they're all part of calling heaven and earth to witness. V'tahei hashira lahem, so that this song, this poem, is an aid, as a witness. Shesofan live good, to act treacherously. It's basically Rashi saying what I said to you. This is all setting up the situation. V'lo yizkaru harishonot, and they're not going to remember these early blessings and acts of God, she'asa lahem, which he performed for them. V'lo hanoladot, and it doesn't refer, these words are not referring to subsequent events, shehu atid la'asot lahem, which he would perform for them in the future. Lefichach tzarich leyashev hadavar lachan ulachan, and for this reason, one has to understand, right, to make sure that we understand this matter, hadavar lachan ulachan, on the one place and in the other place, bechol ha'inyan musav al zachor yamot olam. And in other words, we need to be able to make a distinction, Rashi saying, between whether this is referring to acts in the past or in the future. And of course, he's saying it is all referring ultimately to the past. We can interpret it in these other kinds of ways, but essentially, the main purpose of this poem is to act as testimony, right? And so it's all that we're reading is hanging on the words, remember the days of old, binu shnot dor vador, understand the years of of the generations. Kain asalahem, this is what he did to them, those early generations that rebelled against him. Remember, we said reference to the generation of the flood and the generation of the separation of nations, etc. V'chein atid la'asot kol zeh haya lahem lizchor. And in truth, of course, and thus in the future, he was going to do all of this. Haya lahem lizchor. They needed to remember this, these particular moments. Continuing. All right. Again, it's all these positive things. We can take a look a little bit at the Targum here. Okay, so here he says, here's the verse in the Targum: Hashem bilchodohi, the Lord by all alone, atid leashrit on, leashrayot on, alma, that he will settle them, he will place them, alma, in the world, dahu atid leidchadata, that he in the future will unify, right? And I'm thinking of this talking about the Messianic time. V'lo yitkayam kadamoi, and the before him will no longer exist polchan ta'avan, the service, the worship, right, of their ta'ava. Again, it's got to do with lust, something like that, desires, etc. Or maybe it means the worship of the things that they lust after. Could be that. Could be that. Okay. So next verse. Yarkivehu al bamote aretz. He caused them to ride upon the heights of the earth. Vayochal nuvot sadai, and they would eat the produce of the field. Vayenikehu, and he caused dvash, honey, to come, to trickle, misela, from the rock, veshemen mechal mishtzur, and oil from the flinty rock. Take a look at the Rashi, right? Yarkivehu al bamote aretz. So he set them astride on the heights of the earth. Kol hamikra ketargumor. So Rashi is saying we need to look at how Onkelos explains and translates the Hebrew here. But I'll keep going. And it could be that he's going to explain some of all of this, right? Yarkivehu v'gomer, he caused them to set astride. Al Shem she'eretz Yisrael. The reason it was on the heights is that the land of Israel, gavohu mikol ha'aratzot, it is higher than all the other lands. So whether it means it geographically, which we know from a geographical point of view isn't the case, but rather maybe means sort of spiritually, right? We talk about making aliyah, right? Going up to the land of Israel. And that's because it is the homeland of the Jewish people. Vayochal tnuvat sadai, that next part of that verse, he eats the produce of the field. Elu peirot eretz Yisrael, these are the fruits of the land of Israel. Shekalim lanov, they bud easily. Ulehit bashel, and to ripen. Mikol peirot ha'aratzot, from all the fruits of the other lands. Now, obviously, this could be, intentional exaggeration, but the idea of using an exaggerated expression to just speak about the quality of the fruits of the land of Israel. Vayinakehu dvash misela, and he drew honey from the rock. Okay, or Vainikehu though means, so a tinok means a suckling, right? So in other words, the way one might understand this is he caused him to suckle honey from the rock. Ma'aseh be'echad, there is a story told, I imagine it's either in the Talmud or the Midrash, of a certain individual, she'amar livnei the Sichni, he said it to his sons in Sichni, Haveli, bring me kliot min hachavit. He said, bring me packed figs, ktziot min hachavit. Bring me packed figs from the barrel. Halach, he went, so Benoit would be his son, right? go and bring me these packed figs from the barrel. Halach, his son went, umatza hadvash saf al piha. He found the honey. In other words, we're talking about the fig honey that was oozing from the figs, floating al piha, at the mouth of the vat or the barrel. Amar lo zo shel dvashhi, and he said to him, "This is honey." Amar lo hashke yadcha letocha. So his son, I imagine this is his son saying to him, "This is honey coming out of the barrel here on the barrel." He said to him, his father said to him, "Sink your hand letocha into the barrel, va'atem ma'alek tziot mitocha." So again, unless it's ata, right? So this is law singular. This seems atem, this is plural, unless this is a hay this is a hay, right? And just that the print's gotten smudged, right? But the point is, you will bring up packed figs, mitocha, from in the midst of it. And this is found in the Sifrei. This story is found in the Sifrei. So it's talking about how the fruit is just so luscious. Veshemen michal mishtzur, and oil from the flinty rock. So again, of course, what are we talking about? Elu zeitim shel gush chalav. These are the olive trees, or the olives from Gush Chalav. It's the name of a place, and I believe that place is identified even today. Bamote Aretz, on the heights of the earth, Lashon Gova. It's simply saying these are areas of high altitude. Okay, a Sadai Lashon Sadeh. So Sadai, the word Sadai, he says, is a poetic form of the word Sadeh, which means a field. Chal Mishtzur, flinty rock. So again, what's the point of that? Tokfo vechezko shel sela. In other words, we're talking about the strength and the power of a rock. Kishe'eno. Okay, so he's saying because it's chal mishtzur, meaning it's in smichut. Kishe'eno davuk lateva shela acharav, when the word is not attached and in the possessive form to the word that follows it, nakud chalamish. It would be spelled chalamish. So chalmish is what we would call the construct form in English of the word chalamish. So it means the flint of. Ukeshahu davuk. Rashi, of course, is giving us a lesson in Hebrew grammar. Kishahu davuk, but when it's attached, when it means something of, nakud chalmish. He simply says that's why it's chalmish sur. It's the chalmish of the rock. And we'll end right here. So we're still talking about God's kindness to the Jewish people. So we'll go there, that's the Rashi, and here we'll go here, right there. And I'm going to stop the share at this point. Any comments? Just simply a description, nothing to discuss at this point. Okay, all right, we'll stop the recording.